Greetings, family. Sister Shanice in the house. We are now live for another Wednesday show. And as always, I've got an absolutely fantastic, blacktastic show lined up for you today. So really excited as always about the presentation and the knowledge and the information that I've been uncovering that I'm going to have the pleasure of bringing to you today. So we are already at episode 16 in this series, and the title of today's series is Black Goddesses of the Ancient World, when African women were revered as sacred. Yeah, most of us may not even be aware of the times, and there are numerous reasons why that is the case. So let me just give you a moment or two to come through the door. And as you come through the door, please do let me know that you're in the house. And, let me know where in the world that you're watching me from as well, because I know I have a global audience, and I'm so grateful for this global audience. I don't take your participation for granted at all. And I can see that the link is a little slow today, but nevertheless, as always, when we have these challenges, we push on through, okay? It will get better as the show goes on because, there's always a lot of traffic at this time of the day when I go live. And that's one of the reasons why we do have some of these challenges. But nevertheless, the presentations are always fantastic and worthwhile. I've just been loving what I've been uncovering over the last 16 weeks that I've been working on these particular series of presentations where we've been looking at our African history, and in particular our ancient African history, and what a journey we have been on as a people. If you have been with me from the outset, from episode 1, let me know in the chat. Let me know how many of these presentations you've actually watched. Have you seen all 15 so far? Have you just maybe seen 10 of them or 5 of them? Let me know in the chat. Really want to know, how you've been finding these presentations. But, as I said, for me, it's just been absolutely phenomenal. The research, the knowledge that our ancestors have been revealing to me, I'm just honored. I really am honored. So I can see I've got a couple of family members in the house already. Absolutely fantastic. Welcome. We've got Brother Kwame Aboje in the house. Looks like you were the first one through the door, beloved. Rise up, Brother Kwame. Always a privilege. I hope you're well. I hope this strong has been great for you. Some say weak, we say strong. I hope it's been a great one for you, beloved. And I hope that all the goals and the plans that you had at the outset of this strong are all being put in place nicely and smoothly. I see we've got Sister Verna, the coach, in the house. High five, Sister Verna. Great to have you in the house. Family, if you need a coach, if you need help and assistance in getting your goals and aspirations, and plans in place to realize your goals, Sister Verna is the person who you need to hook up. So just say at Sister Verna the coach, at Verna the coach, yeah, I'm interested in your services. She's got some workbooks. She's got a book that she's written, Time to Succeed, and a range of materials that you can use to help you to maximize your worth while you are here. Let's none of us go to the grave without realizing our full potential. We've got Mama Adawa in the house. Rise up. Oh, Mama Adawa, love you so much. She said, I've seen all 15. Thank you so much. To those who may be new, Sister Adawa, what are your findings of the 15? Have you learned anything? Is it worthwhile, those who are new today, actually going back and reviewing the 15 episodes? Let the family know in the chat your thoughts. Brother Kwame said he's seen 13. Same with you, Brother Kwame. Thank you so much. Please share, what your experience has been watching those 13 episodes. So we're on episode 16 today. And, the women in particular I think, are going to really find today's session empowering. Oh my gosh, family, you know, I think if the African woman takes her rightful place, then, you know, it will go a significant way towards elevating the family. And if the family is elevated, then, you know, all members of the family, the boys, the girls who become the men and the women of tomorrow, will also be elevated. And so it's so important that we get the right knowledge and the correct knowledge to the family members. And, you know, not just because I'm a woman I'm saying this, but I'm saying that especially if we get the right knowledge to the women, because the women, you know, are the ones who nurture the children. And, you know, the knowledge that we give to our children of themselves is critical. And of course, you know, the men have a very influential and powerful role as well. And if the men, you know, have been risen by strong, powerful women, you know, who have the knowledge of their rightful status in this world, then of course, you know, it will help in the upbringing of our children as well, because they will be instilled with the knowledge. And then as young boys growing into men, when they become the men of the family, hey, they will then also be in a position to ensure that when they bring up their children, bring them up in the knowledge and the confidence of who they really are, their greatness. I mean, family, you're going to see, you know, the great heights prior to colonization that we as women held in our civilizations. Let me just check. Rise up, family. Oh, it's so great to see you in the house. We've got Sister Karen in the house. Rise up, Sister Karen. It's always great to have you in the house, watching all the way from the USA, the United States of America. High five to you. I've got Cousin Lynn in the house. Rise up, Cousin Lynn, watching us from Canada. Sending lots of love and good wishes. Black at you, my beloved, beautiful cousin. Great to have you in the house. I want to rise up Sister Adwa, who's saying absolutely amazing history lessons. I have learned so many new things. Thank you so much, Betty. It's comments like that that just makes the countless hours of research that I do to bring this knowledge to the family worthwhile. If you think the knowledge that you're getting, you're acquiring is worthwhile, then for me, it's worth my while doing. So thank you so much, Sister Adawa, for appreciating loving the works and for saying so as well. Yes, Brother Kwame, knowledge is power indeed. And Sister Adawa said, absolutely amazing history lessons. I've learned so many new things. Yeah, I read that anyway. It's such a great comment. It's okay, reading it again. And Karen is beating up the black one, the Be First family in the house as well. Yes, there was a time when the women ruled as well. And you will understand why as well by the end of today's session. Yes, Brother Kwame, we must teach our babies their history so that they will be smart and confident. Ashe, ashe, ashe. Rise up, Sister Karen, the female researcher, Sister Shanice. Yes, indeed, it is very much a man's world, isn't it? This field of research that I'm in. But I do believe that our ancestors, you know, can give us as the females a kind of feminine perspective, African-centered perspective, which we can bring to the family in terms of us acquiring and sharing the knowledge as well. Brother Kwame is rising up, Sister Lynn and Brother Errol as well. Rise up, rise up. Thank you, Sister Karen, for sharing on Facebook. If each of you can share the link for today on Facebook, that would be absolutely fantastic as well. I'm just sharing a link behind the scenes as well. And then I'm going to be coming to you with a presentation. Let me just quit WhatsApp on the computer here so that we don't get the interruptions, you know, phone calls coming through, etc., etc. We don't want those interruptions while the show is underway. So just posting the link to a few family members and friends as I do. because, wow, I want all of us goddesses, I want all of us Black goddesses to know our status. We need to understand that there was a time when we as African women were revered as sacred, and you're going to find out about that time today. So we're resurrecting the spiritual memory of our ancient African civilization, and in particular, when the woman was revered, when the African woman was honored, when the African woman was sacred, when the African woman was worshipped as creation itself. And I know most of us are unaware of that time, because they've done such a great job of erasing, you know, that time. And this goes back primarily to the era of colonization, you see, because for centuries, the colonial system and the Eurocentric education system has basically reshaped history itself. And in particular, you know, they've done a great job of trying to erase the great African civilizations that actually existed prior to our colonization. And the way that they've designed the education system is for us to see everything through their lenses. And so today, you know, when we go through their education system, we come out actually seeing the world that they have shaped. We come out seeing their heroes, their sheroes. We come out singing their praises. We come out of the education system believing that they are the ones that created everything. And what we do is we see the world through their lenses. What they love, we love. What they hate, we hate. What they desire, we desire. What they despise, we despise. And, you know, they despise us. They despise the African continent. You know, their education and miseducation system sees the African continent as inferior, as just a place that's supposed to supply the world with mineral wealth. And we come out seeing it the same way as well. And what they do as well in that system is they minimize and they suppress, you know, the spiritual contribution, the intellectual and the cultural contribution and achievements of our African civilizations. And of course, you know, they don't value our sacred traditions either. And when we, you know, ruled as a people, we actually value this contribution that us women made in society. And I've sent it to you already, haven't I? Let me do that. So yeah, we elevated the woman, but colonialism minimized and almost diminished the role and suppressed the role of the African woman. But she had a very special spiritual position in the ancient world. I want to talk about that because it's so important that we realize, you know, our spiritual significance as African women. Okay, there were sacred traditions. There were, you know, we were surrounded basically by other divine feminine frequencies. All of this has been dismissed. All of this has been demonized. We have been demonized as African women. And as you know, we have been replaced with women who don't look like us, don't like us. And this has caused generations after generations of us to grow up disconnected and discontented with who we are as African women. And it's time that we address this. We have to, you know, recover that memory. We have to remember the times of our ancestral greatness and reconnect with that greatness as well. It's so important that we do that, because therein, to a large extent, I believe, also lies our power as Africans. We are powerful as a people. And so what colonization has also done, it's made us lose that memory, or it's made the knowledge of our past very kind of fragmented. And so most of us are unaware of that rich, wonderful glorious ancient African history and knowledge. And that's why this series has been so important, because it's making us reconnect again with our ancient past. It's like plugging in that plug, into the socket, and suddenly the light comes on and we begin to see the greatness of our ancestors, and remember, we are our ancestors reincarnated today. I am the daughter of my mother, who was the daughter of her mother, who was the daughter of her mother, and all the way up, you see. And so, we are Asian. We are Asian. You see us today and we say we are X number of years on this planet, but if we go into our DNA, you'll probably find that we are millions of years old as African people. Yeah, and there are many ancient African teachings that we preserved, as we know, through the oral tradition. We preserved some through the temple systems. We preserved some through the sacred art, and we've been looking at some of the sacred art, and we're going to continue today looking at some of the sacred art that our ancestors created as well. And there are all these initiation practices, etc. But as we know, wars, invasion, enslavement, and the destruction of our ancient African cities and kingdoms and empires has led to, the fragmentation of our history and the lack of knowledge that we all have of our history over the course of time. And so we've really got to do a lot of work through research in order to bring this knowledge back again. So, much work needs to be done. And the more of us that are involved in doing this work, the better it is, family. And so we all have a role to play. You see me doing my little bit here. Thank you so much to all of you who support the work that I'm doing here. Much appreciate love. But all of that, those invasions and that destruction, has really reduced the sacred status that we as African women had. But, I'm bringing that knowledge back today. I'm bringing that overstanding back today, because we have got to understand as African women, our sacred role in the world, in society, in the family home. We have been separated from our sacred position for far too long. And, this world that we're living in today, and the media and the narrative that they put out there as us as African women, has been distorted for far too long. And most of us, because we were unaware of our true status and our true role in history, have run away with what the contemporary media has been socializing us to believe of ourselves. And quite often, we have been portrayed in a very narrow, negative, stereotypical, derogatory way. And this social conditioning, has affected us. And it's also affected the way that we as African women are seen in the world. Well, we've got to address this, because otherwise, not only will others have a lesser view of us as a people, we ourselves will begin to have, a lesser view of who we are. And we absolutely, can't have that. So a lot of work to be done to undo the social conditioning. A lot of work needs to be done to counter the negative portrayal of us as African women. And I want to rise up all the wonderful African women who are doing the work that needs to be done to elevate us as African women, because as we are elevated, the family is elevated. And as the family is elevated, all members of our family who are contributing towards the community become elevated as well. And so we've got a lot to do to redress the negative image of us as African women. And I'm going to be doing my bit today, and I'm going to be reminding us that, as African women, we were and therefore still are the divine creators. We are the healers. We are the priestesses. We are the queens. We are the cosmic life-giving force on this planet, you know, and we have been absent from our place on the pedestal for far too long. And the mainstream historical narratives, they've had their field day, but it's now time for us to take back the pen, and it's time for us, you know, those of us who weren't aware of our particular role as African women in today's society, to be reminded of who we really are as the sacred ones that we are, the ones who are central to the balance of the universe. We are central to the balance of the universe, family. Okay, I've sent out quite a few of the posts. So let me jump over to the chat and check that our family is coming through the door, because I'm ready to start. Glad to have you in the house. Please do give me a thumbs up, give me a like as well. Each and every one of you, as you come through the door, please do give me a like. Sister Karen said, YouTube was sharing your platform early this week. Oh, what? Okay, they're starting to share my platform again. That's fantastic. Glad to hear that. Sister Berna says, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. I have learned so much. Keep up your amazing work, sis. Thank you so much. To those of you who are sharing this platform as well, thank you so much. Sister Karen is rising up the Black kings and queens. She's like, come here to get some real Black history, learn and spread the knowledge. Rise up. Thank you so much. We got a goddess in the house, a warrior goddess as well, saying, what's up, everybody? Hey, high five. Great to have you in the house. Mr. V says, greetings, Cousin Lynn and Brother Errol. Glad to know that you are tuning in to the Sister Shanice amazing teachings. Thank you so much, family. We've got wonderful family members in the house. And so I think you're ready for me to get the presentation underway. Certainly hope that you are. I am rearing to go, because, you know, we are the ones who are going to have to do the job, as Bob Marley said, to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, because none but ourselves can free our mind. And, you know, the change that we want to see starts in our mind. If we can change the way we think, we will change the way we act. And if we can change the way we act, and we are acting in a positive and a constructive way, then collectively we will change the situation that we find ourselves in. Yes, they robbed us of our so much of our past, but we are the generation that have been brought here to deliver us from the spell that we have been under for the last 2,000 years. And so hold on, family. We are going to start the presentation today, the Black goddesses of the ancient world. Let me just prepare to share screen and get the presentation underway. So yes, we have got to be the ones to emancipate ourselves from mental enslavement. None but ourselves can free our mind, yeah? And that's the role for us as Africans today, and to share the knowledge with our family and friends as we find the information. Okay, let's see if this is set up right for me to share. I normally have to do it a couple of times, but let's see. Okay, yeah, looks as though I'm there today. Let's go to slideshow and then present to view so that we can get the right fragment. Yes, we are going to do the works to free our minds and to emancipate our minds from that colonial mindset. The colonial mindset that has suggested that we as Africans, you know, never contributed anything to society, that we as Africans, you know, that the continent was just a dark continent where nothing existed and therefore nothing will ever come of it. Can you imagine that there were scientists who were actually, you know, spouting this kind of stuff? Wow. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today for episode 16 in the series of African history hidden in plain sight. And today's episode is about the Black goddesses of the ancient world, African women as sacred icons of civilization. This is something that we as African women and African girls and African children should be taught from a very young age about ourselves, but we're not. This information that I'm going to be bringing today has been deliberately hidden from us. And I sincerely believe that if our young girls were taught the knowledge of themselves, you know, in the way that I'm going to be delivering the presentation today, we would have a totally different, you know, status of Africans women tomorrow. What do you think? Okay, and before I start, family, also just to remind you that I do have a number of books. Here's one of my books, Hidden in the Shadows of Ancient Britain, an erased African history restored. And I've also, there's that way, I've also got the book behind me here. This book isn't to do with the series that I'm doing right now. This is just my recent book that I'm reminding you of. And, you know, it incorporates a lot of research that I've done. And basically that research uncovers thousands of years of African history in Britain. And the reason why it's so important is because you can go through school, college, and university and have no knowledge of the fact that we are the indigenous people of Britain, that we were the first people there tens of thousands of years ago, and that we have a history there that is hidden in plain sight. So when you get that book, you have to be prepared to have your worldview about British history totally change. And I know there are some of you who are going to think, no way, this can't be true. But my sources are in the back of the book. There's an index at the back of the book. You know, my references are there. You can go and check them all for yourself, okay? You can get this book on Amazon and make the gift of knowledge to a loved one. If you have the book already, I thank you so much. And I would suggest maybe you think of making the book a gift as well. If you've got a present to buy, a birthday present, a gift that you want to give, why not make my book that gift? Because not only will you be supporting my work by buying a copy of the gift of the book as a gift, but you will be giving that person knowledge of thousands of years of Black British history that has been hidden from us. And this is knowledge that we all need to have as Africans or as Black people in Britain, and those of us who, you know, are not in Britain but want to know what the role of Africans in Britain has been in ancient time, okay? So let's spread the love, let's share the knowledge, each one teach one, and especially when the knowledge that we're sharing is of our true history. So thank you so much in advance. And also thanking you for joining me for today. We are at episode 16, and it's going to be a visual representation of creation itself, because before history was written, before the image of the Divine Mother was transformed across empires to what we kind of recognize it as today, the African woman actually stood at the center of civilization. She stood as the creator, as the priestess, the queen, the healer, and she also stood as the living symbol of cosmic power. And so we're going to be returning to that era, the era when the Black woman was revered, when she was revered as the Divine Mother, the mother of the pharaohs, and the mother of society. And we're going to journey, okay, from the Venus era, and the traditions of the sacred African womanhood to the great temples of Kemet, to the Black Madonnas of the Byzantium and of Europe. And, you know, we're going to be recognizing the enduring goddess traditions of Africa and the diaspora, the traditions that stay with us today that we just don't get the credit for. So let's together discover the hidden connection between Set, which who the Greeks renamed as Isis, and the mother and child tradition, yeah, and the connection between the Black Madonnas of Ethiopia and the Mediterranean, and the ancient Venus figurines, Dear Africa, and the Lady Carthage, Oya, Yemaya, Allah, Olokun, Sekhmet, Ajay, and other powerful African goddesses. The sacred feminine as the force of creation, fertility, transformation, wisdom, and cosmic balance. Family, this session today is more than mythology. So those of you who are looking at this right now and thinking, oh no, we're not going down the road of a mythological story, are we? This is more than mythology. It's a spiritual memory of our African civilization and the role that women played and the status that women had in our civilization, okay, as goddesses. Really, oh, family, this is powerful. For African women, especially in this episode, what I really want to do is to remind us of the fact that our image was once revered as sacred. Our wisdom was honored. You know, today when we come with that knowledge and that wisdom, you know, we might be, you know, suppressed and undermined either in the workplace or the home or within the family or whatever setting it might be, you know, and we might just hold our corner, not realizing there was a time, you know, when our wisdom was actually honored. Our creativity was linked to the stars, the earth, the oceans, and the cycle of life itself. We were not disconnected from greatness. We, as African women, descended from greatness. And I want you to prepare to see African women and African womanhood through the lens of divinity, power, beauty, and civilization. All right. And as you watch this episode today, I want you to try and reflect. I want you to try and reconnect with that African goddess inside of you that was very much part of our history and who we are. So when you see images like these that's on the screen now, that comes out of, you know, today's fashion world, what you're looking at is basically the reincarnation of the image of us as African women, as goddesses. You see, you can strip us naked as you did during slavery, but once we start clothing ourselves again, then the true royal status of us as African women starts to come through. And what we have to make sure of as we go forward is that we no longer disconnect ourselves from the greatness that we descended from. We are the epitome of beauty, of splendor, of fashion, of wisdom, of divinity, of creation. Wait till I get into this presentation. Family, I need you to prepare to see us as the African woman, how she was seen for tens of thousands of years. For tens of thousands of years, the African woman was seen through the lens of divinity. The African woman was seen through the lens of power, beauty, and civilization. All right? And we've got to do what we can to try and reconnect with our former status of Black goddesses, because that's who we are and how we ought to see ourselves. So let's explore the past. Let's explore the ancient civilization. and how they view the African woman. And, you know, I certainly hope that you come away from this session seeing the African woman how you've never seen her before. I want to give credit to the images on these last two slides to the 2026 AMVCA Red Carpet Fashion Show. Okay, I've got these clips from the feature on Fumi Desalu Vold's YouTube channel, so go check that out. Femi Desalu Vold's YouTube channel if you want to see these wonderful images that she has there. And I want to say a big thanks to my beautiful sister Win for bringing these wonderful examples of African womanhood and beauty and fashion beauty to my attention. Thank you so, so much. We are the goddesses of the past in the present. Let's go to the goddesses of the ancient of those civilizations. So here we are from the Venus era traditions. This is the tradition of the Divine Mother. And this here is the earliest representation of African womanhood as we know it today. And this is a very early representation of the mother. This one here of the mother and the child. This one here of the mother. This is a very ancient representation and symbolism of the mother and child. This one goes back to Kemet. And then we have the Black Madonna of the Byzantium Empire. And also Black Madonna, as we know, extended to Europe and all over Europe, Spain, France, Poland, Czechoslovakia, everywhere, all over Europe. The Black Madonna was worshipped, and in some parts of Europe, even until today, the Black Madonna is still revered. The African woman phenotype is still revered as the spiritual epitome of creation itself, as the protector, as the healer, as the embodiment of divine wisdom. So rooted in the cycles of Venus, the fertility, the regeneration and cosmic harmony, the African femininity was understood as a living force connected to the rhythms of nature, birth, rebirth, and the sustaining order of the universe. And this reoccurring presence of the African female divinities across Europe, Africa, Kemet, and the rest of the ancient world, West Africa, the Byzantine world, the Mediterranean world, the European world, reveals that the African woman actually occupied an elevated spiritual, social, and symbolic status in many of those ancient societies. The reverence shown towards the Divine Mother, the fertility goddess, goddesses, the queens, the priestesses, and the creators demonstrate that womanhood itself was understood to be sacred, life-giving, and cosmically powerful. And so our advancement, I would say today, family, is actually anchored in the elevation of the African woman. And if she rises, the entire family rises. And, you know, family, there's a viral video that's going around, and it's a really awful video that's come out of South Africa, where some, I don't know, some wicked, evil, mindless, senseless people are stripped naked, two African women, two African goddesses, and was violently abusing them in the street. And to think that, you know, they don't know what they were doing. They don't know who they were assaulting. They were assaulting a female who in the ancient world prior to colonization would have been revered as divinity itself. Those people, I believe, have brought a curse on themselves. They have brought a curse on themselves for what they did to those African queens. But you see, when you're not in your right mind, family, you see, when you don't know your history, you see, when we run with the colonial education and we as African women don't know who we are, so we can't teach our children who we are, this is what our children then turn around and do to us, that which was seen in that senseless, awful, disturbing video that came out of South Africa. And I hope the other African governments actually stand up to South Africa, you know, and refuse to do business with them or have anything to do with them for as long as this wickedness continues. But that's not what today's conversation is about. So let me just leave it today. Today's conversation is going to be looking at the religious symbolism as well, from ancient Africa to modern Europe. So the deities were back then depicted with Black African phenotypes. Africa hosted some of the earliest complex civilizations. We know this. The last few series have been focusing on some of those early complex civilizations and spiritual systems. And we've seen how Africa's spiritual systems was actually exported to the rest of the world. We saw that the earliest examples of these complex civilizations and spiritual systems was in Africa, and that later ones, you know, popped up across the globe. So early populations of the Nile Valley and the surrounding regions were, of course, highly melanated Africans. In African cosmology, divinity and humanity are interconnected. Gods often resembled the people. Yes, prior to colonialism, our image of divinity and our images of God looked like us, because in African cosmology, that was the norm. Our gods resembled us, the people. Deities were modeled on ancestral forms, and they reflected the sacredness of African life. Black skin, coiled hair, and the broad features symbolize primordial origin, fertility, and cosmic power. And we've seen this in each of the episodes on all the different continents, on all the continents that we have been looking at. The earliest complex civilizations depicted their goddesses and their gods and their rulers and their pharaohs and their kings with black skin, coiled hair, broad noses, and features that were basically African. So ancient African societies, they did not, defy their people or consider their people as inferior. They had deities that represented their people at a high level. And their deities also reflected, the idea of beauty at the time, the idea of authority, and the idea of order. That's why when we've been looking at our ancient African civilizations, wherever it was in the world, whether it was in Japan or India or Cambodia or Iran or Afghanistan or Europe, wherever it was, or China, wherever the ancient African civilization was that we were looking at, all of them, from what we could see, had a very high structure in terms of authority and order. And this African knowledge was spread across the continent, primarily through trade and migration. And it started obviously with migration. And in the first episode, that's where we started, with the migration of us as Africans to the various continents around the world. And so, as we spread to the various continents around the world, the African spiritual imagery actually influenced, our cultures. And not only did we take our African spiritual imagery with us, which then influenced our culture, but it also significantly influenced later societies as well. And we're going to see that later societies often adopted the African religious concepts, whilst they might have gradually altered some of the visuals in our African spiritual imagery. We can see that the African religious concepts, although gradually altered, are very much still present in the spiritual systems and in the coding of those spiritual systems today. So you're going to see the over today and next strong as well. I'm going to continue this next strong because I'm going to be showing you more examples of how they've gradually altered the visual representation and the story from our Asian African history to today. So there's a great deception when it comes to you know, the religious world. Many of us know it and many of us don't know it. And, you know, this deception has been to remove the Black deities and to suggest that Africans didn't occupy any role that was significant in ancient times, and then to replace those Black deities with deities that look like the people in the parts of the world that as we know it today. And so, you know, whilst we occupied these central and revered roles in the ancient world, you know, today that is certainly not the case. And what we have today are all of the kind of modern racism, modern racial hierarchies that place, you know, the lighter skin, the whiter skin at the top, and us with a darker hue at the bottom. But in the past, it was the reverse. So on all continents, the supreme being was originally worshipped as the great Black Mama goddess. Yeah. So, you know, over the last X number of episodes, 13, 14 episodes, when we've looked at these temples and these monuments and these megalithic stone temples, we largely looked at, you know, the science and the engineering works that went into building and constructing these temples. We looked at the artisan, the miners. You know, we looked at the professional expertise and the advanced knowledge that the societies must have had, you know, in mathematics and engineering and science and cosmology and astronomy and everything else in order to build these ancient megalithic stone buildings. But what we didn't talk about much, which is a question that I was asked in my chat, you know, what were they built for? And when you start to look at, you know, who our ancients were actually revering and, you know, the image of the deities that our ancestors put on a pedestal back then the answer can be found in the respect that the ancient societies held for the Black woman. So the Black woman was literally put on a pedestal. This image here would have had a stick or some kind of pole, and it, you know, or it would have been seated on a seat. You know, literally we would have been on a pedestal. The Black goddess was recognized as the supreme being and mother of creation. Let me read the text there. It might be a little small for you to see it, so I'm just going to read the text on the poster. It says, on all continents, the supreme being was originally worshipped as the great Black Mama goddess. Human society first coalesced around the figure of the mother, and it was the Black African woman, the mother of humanity. There's a difference between humanity and mankind, yeah? But she is the mother of humanity. She's not the mother of all mankind. She's the mother of humanity. Mankind is mixed with Neanderthal DNA, a kind of man. Yeah, a kind of man, mankind is different from humanity, hue that comes from the earth. Yeah, there's a difference. We're not going into that right now, but I have done other videos on that. But, you know, the Black African woman is the mother of humanity and the true authors of civilizations, the ones who founded original cosmology, technology from which the world's religions and sciences developed. The cosmology was the star science, the mother of sciences, and it was global. It produced the Great Pyramid, the Stonehenge, and innumerable other megalithics, huge stone structures that we've been looking at over the last 14 series before this one, around the world. And we've seen, you know, the fragments that have survived until today of some of those megalithic structures, all built to honor the creation of the great Black Mama. Although his story, his history books dare not tell us this truth. The world's present day religions, mathematics, sciences, astrology, astronomy, horology, chemistry, and computer science are but dilutions and fragmentations, distortions or corruptions of the original Black Mother science. Today, the world's present religions, mathematics, sciences, astrology, astronomy, horology, chemistry, computer science are but dilutions, fragmentations, distortions, or corruptions of the original Black Mother science. From time immemorial until the albino man usurped Black civilization, the primordial supreme being was worshipped all over the world as creatresses and not creators. The earliest icons of God depict God as a Black G-male with kinky peppercorn hair. We have here the image of Venus of Willendorf. Look her up, family, and check her out. Venus of Willendorf, this is her statuette. And you can look at the figure of this beautiful sister queen, and you will see figures like this all over West Africa, all over various parts of Africa, America, and other parts of the world. And this particular statuette is estimated to be around 30,000 years old. It was rediscovered in 1908 in Austria. And it was back then in the early 20th century, they estimated it to be around 10,000 BCE. And this is an example of how later technology can redate some of these artifacts. And this is what's happening now, because, you know, in the 19th century, there was an agenda to collapse time around our history so that we didn't know how ancient we really are. But now, you know, that there are more disciplines that are looking at artifacts, the information is coming out about how old some of these pieces are. And so in the early 20th century, they thought this was dated around 10,000 BCE, or they said it was. By the 1990s, research pushed it to 25 to 30,000 BCE. And there's even recent high-resolution 3D scans and archaeological analysis of the surrounding sediment layers that this was actually found in. And, you know, this is why they're refining the time and the age of this piece to around 29,500 to 30,000 years ago. It belongs to the Gravettian industry of the Upper Paleolithic Old Stone Age era. If you get my book, I actually give us our Stone Age era back. Yeah, we had a magnificent Stone Age era. Our Stone Age era was when we were building monuments, megalithic temples, and wonderful structures in stone. So anyway, this is the Venus of Willendorf statuette, and it's just one of the most famous examples, but it's not the oldest, it's just one of the most famous examples. And this was found, as I said, in Austria, and is dated around 30,000 years old. But there is an older one, Venus of Hohl-Fels, that was found in Germany, and that one's estimated to be about 35 to 40,000 years old. So I'll come to that one in just a little while. So here we have, the era that the Venus of Willendorf statuette belongs to, and another example of the sort of work of art that our ancestors were doing during that era. So, the statuette was in this era of art, and look at this piece of art here that goes back to the old Stone Age era. This is a replica of it. But it goes back about 30 to 40,000 years ago. And how much do we really know about this era? So we're thankful for the statuettes and the cave art, the rock art paintings that our ancestors left behind, because this gives us a bit of an insight into the technology of its time. And, these would have been very specialized tools, specialized thinking concepts, and artistry that actually went into creating these designs. And at that time, those industries were a culture in Europe that spanned between 33,000 to about 21,000 years ago. And this picture here, this cave art picture here, is actually in France. And so we've had many golden ages in Europe, and it goes back to the Paleolithic era. And we had technology then, we had art, we had our complex social behavior, because remember, when you're talking about statuettes, there would have been a whole industry around producing these statuettes. I remember reading somewhere, I think they found thousands of them. There are thousands of these statuettes that they found across Europe in these ancient tombs. And that tells us, about the belief system. It's a bit like them digging up tombs today and finding, cross, the gold cross and what that represents, yeah? This is synonymous with the belief system during that particular era, yeah? And so you can see that it must have been quite a sophisticated and complex society to be able to build those stone statuettes, those miniature statuettes. There would have been a belief system around it. There was artwork going on. Our ancient past is more sophisticated than his story gives credit for. And we've got to do a lot more work to uncover the truth of our incredible and remarkable ancient history through technology, through art, through the behavior of our ancestors and what they've left behind. And we've got to do this through the lenses from an African-centered perspective. So here we have the old Venus of Hohl-Fels, 40,000 years old. They've dated this. And next to it, you've got Venus of Brazenboe, 25,000 years old. And you can see she's rocking her braids as well. And so here we've got two views of the Hohl-Fels figurine. And this may have been worn around the neck. Maybe there was a chain, and these would have been worn around the neck. As I said, they represented fertility, protection, just as we might wear a cross today, or a Star of David, or some other amulet, which is going to give us, that spiritual covering and protection that we might be looking for. But this is the oldest, undisputed, complete prehistoric human figurine. When they say prehistoric, it's pre their history. Yeah, for us, it's not prehistoric, but for us, it's just our history. But for them, it's pre their history, why they call it prehistoric. And this is a human figurine dating approximately 40,000 years ago. As I said, in time, we might find it's dated much older than that, 60,000, 80,000, 100,000 years old. And this is currently in a museum in Germany, and it was rediscovered in 2008. And this here is a little 6-inch statuette that's been crafted or carved from mammoth ivory. And no, this here, yeah, from mammoth ivory, because it's got the exaggerated breasts in the genitalia area, suggesting a role in fertility or protection. So here you've got the Venus of Brazenbury, 25,000 years old, goddess figurine. We're looking at this and unable to see this one because, you know, it's made out of this ivory color. So, you know, they think they can claim it as their own, even though they weren't around during these times. So anyway, this is a meticulously carved piece from a mammoth ivory, and look at the detail to accentuate the African braid. And so in the last episode, we were looking at goddesses and princesses and queens of Egypt wearing the African braid style as extension and as wigs. But here, and they go back like 5,000 years or so, but this figurine here goes back 25,000 years. So family, what this is telling us is that we as African women have been plaiting and braiding our hair for over 25,000 years. That is a powerful statement of continuity of our culture. Wow. So what we're looking at here is a very ancient representation or reflection of our religious spiritual belief system, the craftsmanship of those artisans, you know, and, you know, the symbolism and what it all represented to our Asian ancestors, the thought process, the cultural expression, it's all here, you know, and there's so much that I'm sure some of you can look at this and say and discuss that these are what our goddesses would have looked like 25,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago. And it was at a time in history when the female, the mother, represented fertility, represented protection, represented the life giver. And therefore, because she gave life, she was viewed as creation itself and was put on a pedestal, you know, for that reason. And then there was a time then when we moved from the symbolic worship of the African mother to the Trinity. So we're going to come to that as well in a little while. So, but at the time of the worship of the African Venus figurines, what we do know is that that worship of Venus was actually rooted in the ancient science of charting the stars, to understand the divine mother as a creative and rhythmic force in the universe. So long before the Roman name Venus existed, African spiritual systems had identified the celestial body as a personification of the primordial mother goddess. So when they studied, you know, the cycle, the astronomical cycles, they associated it with the cycle, the woman's cycle, and her link to the sun and her link to the moon, you know, and there's all sorts of stories in here. So there's the celestial motherhood concepts in here. that the planet Venus was seen as the quintessential mother goddess star. And it represented the divine feminine principle, creativity, birth, and the cycle of growth. And you had the dual nature of the star, the morning star and the evening star. So you had the Asian, African, and Near Eastern cultures that observed Venus as both the morning star and the evening star, symbolizing the balance of dual forces, love and war, birth and death, or peace and power. So when we talk about duality, it goes all the way back tens of thousands of years. Very importantly, in this ancient Venus cycle as well, you've got where the star and the sun, it appears and then it disappears, then it rises again. And it formed the basis of the early myths of the resurrection story. So, for example, the Igbo manifestation of the Enke and Chukwuwu was seen as a self-sacrificing mother who was resurrected. And we're very familiar, even within the Christian story as well, of the concept of death and resurrection. Well, this death and resurrection was very much part of the cycle of Venus as well. And that concept came from the rising of the sun and the going down of the sun. And it manifested itself in a number of Asian African civilization spiritual stories. Then in the Nile Valley area, you had the goddess Osset, who they renamed Isis. She was associated with the star Sirius, Sopdet, but she was also recognized as the divine mother of Venus. Her annual rising coincided with the Nile's flooding, linking the Venus principle to prosperity, abundance, and spiritual life. So you had the link there of Osset to Sirius and fertility, the Sirius star and fertility. And then you've got later deities as well that adopted the same kind of principles. Many scholars and spiritual practitioners, you know, they attribute the Roman Venus to the earlier African Venus and their near African Eastern goddesses as well, like Hathor or Het Heru, Ishtar, and Isis. These are all goddesses that embody the same principle of resurrection, protection, life-giving forces, etc., etc. And then in Kemet, Egypt, you've got the same principle that was embodied in Hathor, the Lady of the Stars, who governed beauty, joy, and the cosmic womb. In West Africa, you had the Yoruba Orisha, Oshun, who was often called the African Aphrodite of Venus, representing sensuality, pleasure, and the sweet waters of life. Then we had in Southern African, the unpopular at the moment, Zulus. They had their cosmology as well, and they viewed the planetary alignments as significant spiritual moments for connecting with their ancestors and reinforcing the interconnectedness of all life. And so, you know, again, we have the cosmology story, we have the alignments of the planets, which we've seen reflected in the way that monuments were built. You had the Ndele people of Zimbabwe, and like other Africans, they had 3 calendars to determine time and seasons. They had the cosmic calendar, the solar calendar, and the lunar calendars. And in ancient Roman religion and mythology, Venus was the goddess of love, beauty, desire, fertility, prosperity, and victory. She was one of the most important deities in the Roman pantheon and was later identified with the Greek goddess Aphrodite. So we can see similar spiritual belief concepts from the most southern tip of Africa to the most northern tip of Africa, all over the ancient world. We can see the significant link between the star system and the deities, and very similar stories of fertility, creation, and beauty, joy, you know, sensuality, pleasure. All of this was wrapped up in the female goddess deity. Now, ancient civilizations actually integrated the movements of Venus into their lives. So it wasn't just about watching the stars and mapping the stars, and it wasn't just about interpreting the stars into their religious belief system, but it also was used, the knowledge that they acquired from the stars was used practically as well. It was a tool for survival because, you know, Venus has a highly predictable 584-day cycle, and they call it the synodic period. And that served as a reliable secondary clock to the solar and lunar calendars. So imagine the knowledge that we had back then, family. If we had 3 calendars happening side by side, if we could read the seasons from the stars and the cycles from Venus and where Venus was, you know, in the sky as well. This is what was going on. On the practical level, these calendars were really important for agricultural purposes. And here we have the Dogons, and they had their Venus calendar. And the Dogon, as we know, they're people of Mali, and they use 4 distinct overlapping calendars, including the solar, lunar, Venus, and the Sirius-based systems. And they're among the most famous for maintaining a specific Venus calendar alongside their solar and Sirius calendars. Priests actually use the planet's different phases, its appearance as the morning star versus the evening star, to determine auspicious times for community events, a long-term planning, a regular lunar month that couldn't be tracked. And so we see, you know, the use of the star system within the calendar systems. And now we see the link between the calendar systems and particular community events and how they would plan, you know, for agricultural purposes, etc. So it's all about synchronizing, the synchronization of above with below, as above, so beneath. The synchronization of the stars and the heavens with the soil and the season. And so in many regions where this was practiced, the transition of Venus was used to double check the solar year. So unlike now today, where we just rely on our one calendar, back then we had, you know, at least 4 calendars that we were using. So, for example, the heliacal rising of Sirius signaled the immediate coming of the Nile floods in Kemet. The position of Venus helped astronomers fine-tune the timing for the Perek, that's the sowing season, when to sow the seeds, to ensure that the seeds weren't just planted too early in the soil, because then it would be too wet from the receding waters. And so, you know, all of this had been cleverly mapped out. And all of this knowledge, this very, what we would call today, advanced knowledge of being able to read the stars and then interpret that in terms of agriculture, etc., was very much known to us in the ancient world. And it was like having knowledge from the stars, when to plant, when to harvest, you know, when to sow the seeds, when the rains were going to come. And there were various East African cultures as well, such as the Borena of Ethiopia. They utilize special star positions as well to signal when to start planting, because Venus is the brightest object after the moon, and its presence in specific houses or constellations provided a high visibility signal for distant farming communities to synchronize their harvest or migrations. So just imagine that you've got, you know, a stone structure that has been built in alignment with the stars. For example, the Newmark tomb in Ireland, Stonehenge, you know, the pyramids, you know, at certain times of the year, when there's certain stars align with the planet example, it lights up the inner tomb, it lights up these tombs, it lights up these houses. And just imagine, you as a farmer, these stone structures just light up, and they're all the farmers, and everybody would know, oh, it's time to sow our seeds, and everyone will plant at the same time. We've lost so much knowledge as a people. Wow, wow, wow. So the use of Venus in agriculture was very much part of a broader indigenous knowledge system that we all knew. And this is where the celestial observation was basically intertwined and inseparable from the knowledge that we had of our environment and what to do in terms of agriculture. So, you know, by using the twinkling of the stars, we could observe with clarity, you know, Venus and the other stars, and the traditional timekeepers could predict upcoming wind patterns or the onset of a rainy season. How many of you have got family members or ancestors who say, yeah, man, rain a come, rain coming. Oh, you know, we just know so the rain a come. How many of you have, you know, traveled with elders and they've looked up at the stars and they're like, okay, it's going to be a good day for fishing tomorrow, or looked up at the stars and said, oh, it's going to rain tomorrow, because, you know, they have the traditional knowledge of being able to read the stars. We've lost all of that knowledge now. There was a sacred geometry in farming. The Dogon people, you know, they believed in the rotation of the planetary bodies, and they favored the growth patterns of specific medicinal and agricultural plants. And all of this, you know, was based on their knowledge that they had of the celestial world. So we've lost a lot of knowledge, and we're so dumbed down as a people. Most of this, none of us are even taught about it in school, college, or university. How many of us are taught about, you know, Venus and the star system and all the different calendars and the link between the African goddesses and the Venus star belief system? You know, they've disconnected it all from us. And here, you know, we get to a time from 40, 30,000 years ago to about 5,000, 6,000 years ago, where we move from the worship of the African goddess Venus, associated with the star Sirius, or the primordial celestial mother, to the Holy Trinity. When I say the Holy Trinity, some of you might think of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, but before, thousands of years before Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, there was another Holy Trinity. That Holy Trinity was in North Africa. And it was Osor, Oset, and Heru. Now, Heru it's been renamed. You know the Greeks have renamed Osor, Oset, and Heru, yeah, to Osiris, Isis, and Horus. So if you see Osiris, Isis, and Horus, yeah, or you see Osor, Oset, and Heru, we're talking about the same Holy Trinity, okay? And this basically represented a shift from the cosmic focus of spirituality to the family-based moral and resurrection theology. Yeah, so we've moved from the heavenly to the earthly. And this transition didn't happen as a single event. It basically happened over probably thousands of years. It was a gradual kind of historical evolution, but that eventually solidified, you know, at the start of the dynastic period of Kemet, around about 3100 BCE. That was about 5,000 5,000 years ago. So in the pre-dynastic age of the goddesses, the African spirituality was heavily tied to the star Sirius and associated with the feminine principle Venus. But by the Old Kingdom, 2686 BCE, the story of Osar, Oset, and Heru became the dominant national narrative. By the New Kingdom, 1570, Oset specifically gained immense popularity as the protector of the living and the most powerful healer. So there was this shift, and the shift occurred through a process of spiritual science and social reorganization. And, you know, it's basically designed to legitimize the kingship of the pharaohs and to legitimize their laws, the laws of Ma'at, order and balance. So, you know, they took the spiritual beliefs, systems of the ancients and you know, incorporated it into their rulership role over humanity. And so it was a transitional process. And so here we have a divine family. Yeah, so Osar represented, he was more than just the king, he was the father. You know, Oset, you know, she was the devoted mother and healer. And Heru, you know, he was the son, the restorer of order. So you have the father, the king, you have the mother, the healer, the goddess, and Heru, the son, the restorer of order. And, you know, this integration actually gave the pharaohs kind of political legitimacy because they weren't just kings, they were divine, you know, being, they were chosen by God. They were the Holy Trinity, and they used it to establish the concept of the God King. The living pharaoh was seen as the earthly incarnation of Heru, while the deceased pharaoh became Osar. So this created a direct lineage between the divine and the government. And this is where we see the resurrection theology story as well. The story is of Osar's death and Oset reassembling of his body. And Heru, the son, his birth was an immaculate conception. And this story basically provided the world's first fully developed theology of the resurrection and eternal life. And this is also, you know, and in this story also embodies the original Venus story, the celestial side of the Venus belief system of the rising of the sun. And it dying at night when the sun goes down, but then it rises again, it resurrects again in the morning. So we can see, you know, the story of the resurrection and the eternal life story continue, the continuity of that story in the divine Trinity here as well. So this kind of made religion more accessible to the common, the so-called ordinary person, the ordinary citizen, because it promised them life after death. It promised everyone life after death. If the son, Heru, can have life after death, so could everybody, and not just the elite. So as the Trinity grew in influence, earlier goddess forms like Hathor or the stellar deities, they were absorbed into the character of Oset. Later, the Greeks and the Romans adopted these African concepts, and eventually it influenced the foundation of Christianity itself. The concept of the Christian Trinity and the icon of the Madonna and Child came out of these early Egyptian theological concepts. The concept of Osar's death, and Osset reassembling his body, the resurrection, the Immaculate Conception story, the eternal life in coming back to life, life after death. We can see in here the story that the Greeks and also the Romans actually adopted later on. So here we have the Kemetic Holy Trinity. We have Heru, who was renamed as Horus. We have Osar and Osset. Heru, yeah. So, and we have Osset. So this concept depicts basically the tradition to ancient Kemet of the divine family, and that symbolized concepts of life, concepts of death, the concept of rebirth, and all of this was before the Christian Trinity doctrine. So you have Osar, aka Osiris, you have Osset, aka Isis, and you have Heru, aka Horus, yeah, from the central Holy Trinity of ancient Egyptian Kemetian mythology. Wow. So it was the ancient Greeks who changed the name of the Egyptian deity Osir to Osiris, and they changed Osset to Isis, and they changed Heru to Horus. And this alteration occurred during the Greek occupation of Kemet, stroke Egypt, particularly under the Ptolemaic dynasty. So as part of a broader, well-documented process of Hellenizing the African gods, the cultural figures, to make them more familiar to a Greek-speaking audience, or some might say it was basically another example of them hijacking our culture and our theology and traditions. So many scholars, you know, they can see and actually observe and refer to this Trinity, the ancient Kemetic Holy Trinity, as the original Holy Trinity. So you've got these triad, three primary deities, and from the Osiris myth. Okay, so you've got Osar, which I put the wrong way around. You've got Osar, you've got Heru, and you've got Isis, Osset. Okay, and Osar, he represented the god of the afterlife, death and resurrection. And this is him shown in a crouch position on a pillar. And then you've got Osset. She is representing the devotion and feeling, and she's identified by the cow horn and the solar disc. You know, the solar disc goes back to an earlier belief system as well. And then you've got Heru, Horus, the sun child, and he represents the divine kingship and protection. And he's depicted with this falcon head and wears the double royal crown. So this is the original Holy Trinity, Father, Mother, and Child, the divine unity within the family. And this is a concept that we're all familiar with in Christianity, but, you know, what they don't do is tell us where the original Holy Trinity actually comes from. Not only do they hide the truth about the Holy Trinity, but also about where the veneration of the mother and child comes from as well. So here we can see this spiritual tradition of the veneration of the divine mother and child. And this is a sacred expression of creation, of renewal of life, the cycle of life, you know. And so embedded within this spiritual concept, we've got the attributes that were previously associated with Venus. Fertility, this is what Venus represented, the Venus figurines, African woman figures represented. Fertility, beauty, love, cosmetic, harmony, and regeneration. And over the centuries, yeah, from 40,000 years ago, coming down to 5,000 years ago, you've got the same symbolism of the mother goddess and child that transcended into Kemet itself and influencing the religious and cultural traditions of that era. And it was the religious and cultural traditions of Kemet that actually spread from North Africa across the Mediterranean and into Europe. On to the next slide. Oops, no, go back. So here we have the African goddess iconography that you're familiar with that transcended into the Byzantine era. That's roughly about the 4th to 15th century CE. And during that time, you've got the rich example of all the ancient African religious motifs blended into Christian art. This is the time when, you know, the African image was still very much, you know, the religious symbolism of creation, of divinity, of beauty, you know, from the 4th to the 15th century. If you look across the Byzantine art during that era, you know, all across Europe, from Northeast Africa to Europe, you will see this religious blend of African cultural, spiritual kind of Christian imagery. And it was all about, you know, that deep-rooted spiritual traditional belief system that North Africa, Kemet, was actually influencing across the developing world. And, you know, this here, this really prominent connection of Set or Isis, you know, with her child is a depiction that, you know, we see across the Byzantine empires, across the Mediterranean, all the way into Europe, that then changed in complexion in more recent times. So we can see, you know, here Isis nursing her infant, the god Horus, because, you know, he was the child that was immaculately conceived. And, you know, we can see the visual continuity of the mother and child. There's a pose in the Byzantine and Coptic art, all across the Coptic art, all across Ethiopian art. You can see the striking resemblance of these ancient images of Egyptian statues, Ethiopian statues, Mediterranean statues, all depicting, you know, the African woman with the child, all kind of seamlessly coming in from Egypt and across the ancient world. And here, as I said, we can see, you know, the ancient mother and child concept evolving and transitioning to represent the Virgin Mary and Jesus. So now we know where the story of Mary and Jesus kind of stems from, okay? This Osset, Isis, she was revered as the mother of God. And here is Mary, who's revered as the mother of God, a mirroring of the same early African, Northeast African belief system. And it was the same for the Black Madonnas The Byzantine period saw the creation of many icons with dark and black skin. And if you put in, you know, black Madonnas, they'll all come up. All the different styles of black African women as the mother of God, the mother creator, the protector, the nurturer. You've got this one is the Black Madonna of Chesa Gestochoa. And this one's dated to the 14th century. And it's believed to follow the much older Byzantine or Hodgkarita style. And it was influenced, obviously, by the earlier Kemetic and North African portrayals as well. So in these icons, we can see the use of dark skin actually was interpreted by some just, you know, in recognition of the African origins of the divine mother archetype. So who's the divine mother? The African woman. Who's the divine mother? The original divine mother? The African woman. And I could have put my Venus mother in there as well. So beyond the recent mother and child motif that we tend to see in present day Christian churches, there was the mother and child, the Black Madonnas, the mother of God, God being the child that was immaculately conceived. This is a story that goes back thousands and thousands of years. This one here goes back about 5,000 years. This one goes back just under 2,000 years. And the Black Madonnas were all across Europe from about the 4th through to the 15th century, and is still very much the image that's worshipped until today in some of their cathedrals, etc. So beyond the mother-child motif, there are other African and North African figures that also personified in Byzantine art. So you've got Dear Africa. In Roman and early Byzantine eras, Dear Africa was often personified as a goddess wearing an elephant scalp headdress and holding a cornucopia representing fertility and abundance. And so we have the same concept of the African woman personified as a goddess. And this was in Roman and the early Byzantine era. Yeah, and she represented fertility and abundance. And this is a concept, as we now know, that goes back at least 40,000 years. You had the Lady of Carthage. And those of you who are familiar with Carthage, you'll know the story of Hannibal, you know, the great African warrior who could have taken Rome, but, you know, had a soft heart and so didn't. And as a result, when 20 years later, Rome grew in power and came and took them out. A bit similar to the Iran story today. If Iran were to follow through, they could actually take out Israel. They've been preparing for the last 20 years because they've been watching what the Israelis have been doing over the last 20 years to their neighbors. And they saw the writing on the wall. And so for 20 years, they have been in preparation mode. And execution is happening or was happening during our lifetime. Similar story in the Carthage era. You had Hannibal, this great warrior. He was, you know, America, for example, the United States of America, back in his day, going and conquering the world, you know, taking territory, taking over empires, kingdoms. Carthage was, you know, a magnificent, beautiful city or empire. From the description, it was full of palaces, and it was an absolutely amazing city. And they could have conquered Rome, but the people of Rome cried and cried. They were at the gate. His army was at the gate of Rome, and he was there for something like 12 years contemplating whether to take it, Rome or not. His generals were telling him, take Rome, take you know, sack the city. He didn't listen. Eventually he left them. And Rome spent 20 years preparing to go and destroy Carthage, and they did. Totally sacked and scorched Carthage, destroying and uprooting one of Africa's most glorious empires that was ever built. Wow, wow, wow. An amazing story. Do read up on the story of Hannibal from an African-centered perspective. So you have the Lady of Carthage, and there's mosaics from that era as well. I remember you would have had early Carthage under the African era of Hannibal, and then you would have had the later Carthage that was rebuilt during the Roman era as well. So, you know, the depiction that you get of Lady Carthage will depend on the era that you're looking at. Okay, but during that era, they actually had depicted regal female figures with large expressive eyes, and you know, that stylistic look that we're familiar with in terms of both the ancient Egyptian and Byzantine sacred art. So we have the divine African woman as goddesses across Africa. Just to give you some examples, you've got Oya in the Yoruba tradition. She represents the goddess of storms, winds, and transformation. Those of you who are familiar with some of these superpower heroes will know where they get their ideas from, okay? You had Allah in the Igbo tradition, who represented the goddess of earth, fertility, and the underworld. You have Olokun in the Yoruba Benin tradition. She was the goddess of the ocean and wealth. I'm talking about beautiful African sister queen goddesses, okay? You had Mami Wata, the West and Central Africa goddess of water, beauty, and seduction. You had Sekhmet, the Egyptian lioness goddess of war and healing. We had Nana Buluku, West Africa and Diaspora, supreme mother goddess. We have Isis, of course, or Set, the Egyptian Kemetic goddess of magic and motherhood. We have Yamaya, the Yoruba and Diaspora ocean mother and protector. You have Ajay, the Yoruba goddess of wealth and market trade. And we have Mbokomu in Central Africa, the Bantu mythology, goddess of creation. And so, you know, we have the mother goddess, spiritual traditions all across the various African nations. West Africa to North Africa to East Africa, all across Africa. You have Oya here, who is the fierce Orisha of the wind, lightning and transformation in Yoruba with mythology. So all of these warrior goddesses are known for bringing some kind of change, known for guiding the dead, known for unleashing devastating storms or being a protector. You know, they were the women, the queens that had this powerful force of nature that was embodied within them, because creation was within them, destruction was within them. So each of these goddesses that I've mentioned, you know, were able to control some aspect of this universe, be it earth or fertility or the water or the underworld, you know, the afterlife. We had powers, and some of our divine African women goddesses knew how to exercise those powers. So, family, in conclusion, whew, what a journey that African woman has had over tens of thousands of years, from the time when we were viewed as a source of creation and cosmic order. Figurines such as the Venus of Willendorf, Isis or Set, Allah, Nana Buluku, you know, these women didn't just represent mere companions of males or male gods, but we represented the foundational forces of creation itself. We represented fertility, we represented wisdom, justice, and spiritual balance. We were the divine mother concept. We were positioned as women as the bearers of life. We were positioned as the guardians of sacred knowledge, protectors of kinship, mediators between humanity and the divine. And so many African cultures had their African women spiritual mediums who were able to communicate with the spiritual world. These were our special powers. You had the African feminine principle that was associated with power, not weakness. You know, power, the wind, the storms, the rains, the weathers, we controlled it. You know, I would imagine, nurtured the knowledge of how to control the universe, you know, the weather. You know, that was the power that African goddesses had. And we were depicted with those powers over thousands of years. You know, some women had the power, you know, to wage wars and win wars. Some had the power to heal, like Kemet. You had some like Olokun and Yamaya, who controlled the oceans and wealth. You had those that could bring storms and transformation. There was Oya. You had Aceh, who was about commerce and prosperity. We had our different, you know, female African spiritual energy goddesses for different aspects of our life. And of course, you had Mbokumu, that was about creation itself. And what this suggests is that these ancient African societies recognize the feminine power as multidimensional. We operated at different dimensional levels. Wow, the power. Not only were we about bringing forth life and nurturing life, but we had a formidable creative and transformative role in society. And of course, you've got the Black Madonna iconography that was found across Ethiopia, the Byzantium Empire, Southern Europe, the Mediterranean, and all of that kind of just reflected the continuity with the older African sacred traditions, especially the image of Isis nursing Horus, you know, that's developed now into the image of Mary nursing Jesus. And these traditions, even that we see in today's Christianity, have been preserved from our earlier tradition. The sanctity of motherhood was highly respected. The divine feminine character was highly protected as well, and was seen as a protector. And this is, you know, African centered sacred iconography that goes back thousands of years. And the association of the Black woman, the African woman, with holiness and wisdom cannot be overstated, because, wow, look at it, it was intertwined as one. And of course, you know, we were honored for the cycle of life itself, the Venus figurines, the mother goddesses traditions that symbolize fertility, regeneration, the rhythms of nature, birth and rebirth, cosmic cycles tied to the moon, the stars, and Venus. The African Venus archetype that wasn't just about the physical beauty, but about the sacred regenerative force of the universe, the power through which life continually renews itself, was happening through the woman, the African woman. The African woman held, you know, religious and cultural authority in ancient times. And, you know, the prominence of the female deities that we've been looking at today suggests that the African woman in Many African civilizations held highly respected roles as priestesses, as queen mothers, as spiritual leaders, as healers, as custodians of lineage and tradition. In Kemet, especially the women, we could inherit property, lead temples, become pharaohs, and wield spiritual authority unmatched in many ancient societies. Family, I'm going to continue with this next strong, because next strong, what I want to be able to show you are the ancient symbolisms that are encoded within our African history, hidden in plain sight. And we're going to continue to look at it from a spiritual perspective. So you're going to see the similarities or the continuity of those ancient African spiritual belief systems encoded into today's Christian belief system. So let me just stop today's presentation there. And I hope you come away from this presentation today, as I have when I was preparing it, with a greater knowledge of who we are, wow, as women. Let me see what you're saying in the chat. Are you still with me, family? Let's see what you're saying. Yes. We got watching the hawk in the house. Welcome. Bible told us that women are not important. Yeah, and are weaker vessels, but Africa's civilization, Black women hold the center. Rise up, Sister Queen Shannon in the house. Good to see you in the house. Rise up, watch the hawk. Great to have you in the house as well. Thank you for that comment. That's right. I said very early on, didn't I? This is what they do. They, denigrate the African woman. They reduced us and have suppressed us in today's religion. But as we could see from the earlier belief systems, we held positions of wisdom, of knowledge. We were central to those societies back then. Sister Adawa says, never disrespect your sisters and mothers. That's so, so true. When you understand, the status of the African woman, you would revere her. And your blessings or whatever you are looking for in the world today comes from, your elevation and your relationship with the African woman. The ancient civilized world had the African woman as the epitome of power, beauty, she was the symbol of an advanced civilization and the symbol, of spiritual knowledge, and it was all expressed through her. And so, they couldn't have got that so wrong thousands of years ago. Look how great our civilizations were back then compared to now. Dorabelle is in the house. Rise up, Dorabelle, who says we should stop saying broad nose like it is the only characteristic of African. To be correct, various nose shapes could be used, not identifying only one type. Okay, I take that on board, Dorabelle. We have a goddess warrior in the house saying we are powerful and majestic. Yes, we are indeed. Brother Kwame is reminding us that lies and even more lies. Africans were lawyers, doctors, farmers, architects, and philosophers. That's right. Africans contributed to the world. African history is vital for all African people in the world. Absolutely. Rise up for those comments there. We've got legendary mercenary in the house. Welcome. Legendary mercenary says, as someone who is half African, Egyptian, and European, British, I firmly believe in the Oa out of Africa model. So it stands to reason that the gods and goddesses were black. Just look at Andromeda. Okay, I haven't looked at Andromeda. I'll have to look that one up. Thank you, Legendary Mercenary. Dorafella says, within a family, you can see various nose shapes. Yes, yes, Dorabelle. It's true. In my family, we have the broad nose. But then my neighbor's family, they may have straight nose. So, yeah, you're right. I think I tend to emphasize the broad nose because the Europeans have gone to great difficulty to always be chiseling away and hacking away, you know, the broad bits of our noses. And I suppose, you know, that's what leads me to just talk about the fact that there are some of our characteristics that you just can't hide. But yes, we do have different shaped heads, different shaped noses, and faces as Africans. Rise up, Brother Errol. Great to have you in the house. You said what great research has gone into this subject. Wonderful. Thank you so, so much. My brother Kwame says, Sister Shanice, I wasn't even taught about this by our parents. This is what I'm saying. You know, if all of us as African women were to teach our children, our African boys and our African girls about, you know, our status as African women and who we really, really are, then we would at least be getting the respect that we deserve from our African men and our African girls, and we would be giving that respect to each other as well, you know, because we would be seeing ourselves through the lenses of our ancestors and how our ancestors saw us, and therefore who we really are as women, you know. Instead, we've been given this narrative and this view of ourselves that is so negative and derogatory. Many of us, you know, don't give our sisters the respect that they deserve because we're not seeing them from an African-centered lens. We're seeing them through a Eurocentric lens that we have been conditioned to seeing ourselves as. Kwame, yes, that's right. Our original Holy Trinity was in Kemet. Yes, indeed. Dorval says, if you didn't know, Venus is both the morning and evening star because its orbit is closer to the sun than Earth's, making it appear only near the sun in our sky. Yeah, and I mean, our ancestors studied all of this, didn't they? They understood, you know, how the Earth orbited around on its axis, how when the sun rises and the sun goes down, they understood the star system, they actually mapped out the stars, they went around the world, you know, mapping out the constellation and building cathedrals and stone monuments in alignment with the star system. Oh, it's just incredible. Dorfel says, Job 9.9, lots of digits. Who makes what's that? Plius and Hesperus and Arcturus and the chambers of the south. Arcturus is another name for Venus. Okay, thanks for sharing that. Yes, the Madonna and her child. Madassi, Sister Shanice, that means in my Akan dialect, thank you. Madassi Pa, beloved, thank you. The real Trinity. So thank you so much for your comments. Let me scroll down. Let's see if I've got a few more. We've got Synovia in the house, bringing up Brother Kwame for the knowledge that he's sharing in the chat. Rise up, Synovia. Good to have you in the house as well. We've got Thomas in the house as well. Yes, there's a conversation going on there. Kwame saying Hannibal, our powerful African war general who conquered the Roman Empire. Yeah, and his war tactics with the elephants, you know, they modeled today's tanks off of how Hannibal used the elephants. Family, remember to give me a thumbs up. Remember to give me a like. Thank you so, so much. To everybody who's been commenting in the chat, thank you so, so much. I really do appreciate you joining me here today. All being well, I'll be back next Wednesday to continue with today's presentation, again highlighting the African continuity of the religious belief system, which was founded around the African woman. It's a beautiful, beautiful story, family. So please do stay with me next strong as well. Denise, great to have you in the house. More love, more strength to everyone here. Denise is here from Chicago in the USA. Big up yourself, family. Thank you. Brother Kwame Osei is in the house as well. The Black woman of today is a shadow of her former self. Exactly true. And that is because we just don't know of our former status and our former greatness. Hence why I'm doing the work. And I certainly hope that this contributes towards helping to elevate the African woman so that she can elevate the African family. Because once the African family is elevated and those sons and daughters know their powers, it's all over. Family, support the works. Buy my book, Hidden in the Shadows, Vation Written. Would much appreciate, love it. Buy the book and give it away as a gift. The gift of knowledge is priceless. Thank you so, so much. If you're not a subscriber, also, please do subscribe. It's been a pleasure, as always, being with you here today. And I want to thank you in advance for joining me again next Wednesday. Same time, put the word out. More love, more strength. Sister Shanice, out of here for now. Bye for now.